good day, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman, who we so appreciate, has been going at this for such a long time and continues to share deeper and deeper about the Mishna. And today we're continuing chapter 2, Mishnah 8, part 12. And after chatting with Rabbi, we're probably going to have a 13 and a 14. I know he's got what to say on the matter, so let's just jump right in and let the Rabbi take over the class. Rabbi, you're live on the air. We're going to turn it over to you, and good to see you as always. I appreciate your messages this week. Your Parshas Bo and your Tanakh Talk were beautiful, and we appreciate all you're doing.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to be here. No shortage of... Fortunately or unfortunately, no shortage of things to talk about. A lot of things going on. Going on in the world. Got a major scandal among the Jewish people right now. Dealing with that. You got this bozo and Boca Raton. Making having a speaker. A missionary, second missionary coming and speaking is in the synagogue. The last one backed down a couple years ago because there was so much outcry, but the rabbi himself wouldn't back down, and he's still not going to back down, right? Obviously it's no problem to have a missionary come speak in your Orthodox synagogue. Not really sure. Spoke about that, and got some flack for even speaking about it because why do I have to keep speaking about it? So you're right, but sometimes things have to be. Sometimes things have to be, spoken about. I don't necessarily do overkill. Let other people do that. They can beat things down, as much as they want, but sometimes things need to be dealt with, and never a shortage of things to speak about. And, someone is very fond of, telling me you could just go on and on and on and on, right, till you drop, right? Then it tries to button it. Go back to that intro. And hopefully it's, it's not just, words. It's hopefully, giving messages and, good stories and everything else. So we started last week. I don't know if we're going to finish this part, but we started last week. The more Torah, the more life, right? And I think that's what we're gonna be certainly today. Not sure. Like I said, I'm not sure we're gonna finish it. But how do we get off topic last week? Because we always get off topic on something, right? And that is, some people think, even bogus rabbis, who they're the ones that probably think this. And that is that there are other things more important than learning Torah, right? And, we spoke about there's nothing more important than learning Torah. You tell me there are certain things supersede Torah, right? Meaning there's a dead body, no one there to bury the dead body, right? There's no Chever Kedishas, no burial society. You shut your Gemara, you shut your Talmud, that's it. You have to go do it yourself. Person's learning, time to read the Megillah, Book of Esther. Right? You have to go hear the Book of Esther. Right? Hear the shofar. There are mitzvahs that supersede learning Torah. True. There are certain cases. Doing the Israeli army is not one of them. Right? That's not one of them. And a person can say, we spoke about it last week, so we're not going to rehash it. Right? But, a person can say, well, I feel that's so important. Well, what about learning Torah? What about if I have all the money in the world? I can sit and learn for 10 years. And I can go through most of the Talmud and all the commentaries. And learn all kinds of things, Jewish law, Jewish philosophy. Nope, you still got to do the army. Person got a screw loose. They absolutely have a screw loose over here. Right? Why do I say that in the harshest terms? Because they're claiming there's something more important than learning Torah. And doing the army is not more important than learning Torah. Sorry, it's not. Right? And anyone who knows anything about Torah will say the same thing, unless you're a religious Zionist. And if you're a religious Zionist, you'll say, come on, if you don't, people don't do the army, Syria's going to come and invade. Right? And guess what? That's heresy. That's heresy 101. You tell me the time of King David. Time of King David, there was always a standing army. You're right. You need a standing army. Right? You also need people to sit and learn, because they're the ones protecting the army. But if it's a milchemetz mitzvah, it's a war that the Sanhedrin says everybody has to go fight, then everyone goes fight. Then everyone goes out. But if it's not, okay, you need people to sit and learn. You need people to do the army. But to say doing the army is more important than learning Torah, that's a little bit much. Right? Now that we sort of demolished, that idea. And now, another idea over here. What do we say? We said, the more Torah, the more love. Now, the Talmud tells me, I learned Torah. What does Torah do? Torah makes me think. Torah makes me think a lot. Right? Makes me think a lot. And it hurts the head because there's a lot to think about. What are people, what are rabbis arguing about? Practically speaking, what's the law? I mean, there are a lot of different ramifications. Many ramifications. So the Gemara says clear, the more Torah a person learns, weakens the body. Not my body, because I'm the Energizer Bunny. I just keep going. Right? But it weakens the body. You're tired. Makes you more tired. Right? On Sunday, so I got a jam-packed day. Right? Book of Leviticus, I'll just throw this out there. At 9 o'clock Eastern time, 4 o'clock Israel time, that's for 2 hours. A little more than 2 hours. Tanakh talk an hour and a half later, 12:30 Eastern time, 7:30 Israel time, that's for an hour. So I got let's say 3 hours and change, of classes. Now I got No Hide Nation, right? 2:30 in the afternoon, Eastern time, 9:30 Israel time. That's another hour, right? Give or take. So now you're about 4.5 hours. And I have a conversion class, 11 o'clock at night. 11 o'clock at night till I finish, till I drop, basically. So that could be an hour, it could be 45 minutes, it could be longer. Last week got a whole discussion about other things, about an hour and a half. I can go to sleep till 1 in the morning. By that time, I was already seeing things. Right? But when a person learns Torah, you're thinking in Torah, makes you tired. Doesn't matter if you give classes or not. Person learns, let's say, 4 hours. Learns 3 hours. Whatever it is, that makes you tired. That weakens the body. Because it takes a tremendous amount of effort to learn. Right? It doesn't matter how brilliant a person is, it's God's law. And if it's God's law, you got to think. Torah is not like mathematics. Torah is not like reading a newspaper. Right? Torah is not like reading a history book. History book, these type of things, I don't really have to think. Right? I'm not saying math, you don't have to think. Okay, you have to apply. You have to apply what you know. You have to apply certain theorems, different things.
No, but it's like food.
The
your
question
body
is,
wants to keep digesting it, yeah?
You're right, but the body doesn't necessarily digest it if you don't understand it.
Right.
Let's say you're learning something and now you've got 6 different factors involved. So now you're trying to piece together 6 different factors and make it all work and try and understand according to these different things. How's it work in this case, that case? There's difference of opinion. What's the practical law? A lot of things. A lot of things going on over here. So a person thinks, oh yeah. Heard someone say, for many people say, come on, I learned that already. I already learned the book of Isaiah. Like, what could you teach me? I've learned the 5 books of Moses. I read them. I read the verses. Like, what possibly could I gain? Someone told me this, and I started giving these classes in the book of Genesis. Right? I started with the book of Genesis. I'm now holding by the book of Leviticus chapter 16. Going to be an interesting class, the death of the 2 sons of Aaron. Right? We're still going to be in the middle of. Right? But so when I started the book of Genesis, someone said, what do I need your class for? Right? It's a free class. Right? It's not like I'm charging anyone for it. Right? So someone said, I can learn it on my own. What do I need you for? I said, you're right. Probably don't need me. I know the Bible, cover to cover, backwards and forward. I said, okay, let me ask you a couple questions. There's a story in the book of Genesis. Talks about Lot and his daughters. Daughters think everyone's killed, right? Sodom gets destroyed. So they get the father drunk. They each get pregnant. One of them not so modest. One of the names of the sons is Moab, right? Me'av, from my father, right? Not so modest over here. And who comes out of Moab? Whether daughter, granddaughter, great-granddaughter, the whole discussion, is Ruth. Ruth the Moabite. Who comes out of Ruth 5 generations later, 4 generations later, is none other than King David. Now, the Christians, it's important for them, the Davidic line, right? Their Messiah, quote unquote, is going to come from them, even though there's a different opinion among the Gospels, right? They don't have the same genealogy. That's a little bit of a problem. A little bit of historical inaccuracy, even though, the upper echelon to the church, they don't really care. That doesn't really bother them. But okay, the future Jewish Messiah, and even the Messiah, according to them, comes from King David. Now, there's a fundamental question. Fundamental question is, why in the world does King David come from that union? Why does he come from that union? So I bet you never thought about that question. Then I go to the story of Yehuda and Tamar. Right? He has 2 sons that die through her. And he tells her, go to your father-in-law's house, until my other son grows up, whatever, I'll give him to you. But, he's not giving him to her. So he happens to be nearby. Yehuda, she dressed up as a prostitute. And, what happens through her is 2 kids. She gets pregnant. She has 2 kids. And kingship never leaves the tribe of Yehuda. Now, if kingship never leaves the tribe of Yehuda, don't you think it's a little bit strange, this whole Misa, this whole action between father-in-law and daughter-in-law, which actually is prohibition of the Torah? Here, seemingly, it's before the giving of the Torah, so we could say it's permitted. Or, however God orchestrated it, this was supposed to happen. And this is where kingship comes from. So I told the person, I said, I bet you never thought about that either. So they said, Rabbi, what's your point? I said, my point is, I don't think you know the Bible as well as you think you do.
We've been going through Genesis with Rabbi Goldberg, the No Hide World Center on Sundays, and we're kind of at that stage in Genesis chapter 20, and he's been doing a lot of explaining surrounding that, and it's very, very interesting material for sure.
There's a lot of questions you can ask just at face value, but you can't read the Torah. You can't read the Torah like you're reading anything else. Well, I'll give one example. Last week's parsha, right before the plague of killing of the firstborn, the Torah over there says that Moshe Rabbeinu tells Pharaoh, "You're right. You're never going to see me again," right, etc. He says, because we're gonna have this last plague, the last plague, and that's going to be killing of the firstborn. Now you have to understand, Moshe Rabbeinu was on a roll. Moshe Rabbeinu is 9 for 9. Whatever he claims is going to happen, happens. Right? So a couple weeks ago, I spoke about that. Right? What's the greatest miracle? Some will say it's the plague of darkness. Someone will say, it's the frogs. Someone might say it's, killing of the firstborn. Every firstborn. Right? Every woman, even if she was married, right? She could have been with other people also. Most likely she was. So every firstborn she had died. And Pharaoh himself was a firstborn. Right? So what do we learn from there? Pharaoh's not worried. Why isn't he worried? He's also a firstborn. So he went about his normal thing. Not only did Moshe Rabbeinu prove him wrong, he claimed to be a god. So God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, said, okay, go to him. He's going to be by the river. He's going to be by the Nile. And, go tell him, this plague's going to happen. Now, why did he go to the Nile? Why did he go find him there? Because Pharaoh himself's a god. If he's a god, guess what? Gods don't go to the bathroom. They don't have to relieve themselves. Well, guess what? What do you think he was doing when he went there? So Moshe Rabbeinu called him on it, among other things. Right? He called him on it. So if God tells Moshe Rabbeinu tells Pharaoh, this is going to happen. That's going to happen. 9 for 9. He's 9 for 9. On the biggest role of his life. You think the 10th thing that Moshe Rabbeinu says, killing the firstborn was probably the greatest of all the plagues, right? You think he's going to, Pharaoh's saying, nah, come on. You're 9 for 9. I'm going to play the odds, right? I'm going to shoot the dice. You're not going to shoot the dice. You're an idiot. You're an idiot over here. So what happened? Says the Torah itself, right? Says the Torah itself. He got up and he went about his normal business. What do you mean he went out of normal business? He's also a firstborn. So if he's also a firstborn, what are you going to say? What are you going to say? He says, Mori Rebbe, Rabbi Chaim Coffman should be well. So he brings down forward. And he says, comes along Pharaoh. You're not worried. You know why he's not worried? Because we're showing people that are evil, and they're steeped in evil, and they're steeped in everything that they do. You can't tell them anything. You can't tell them anything. They're so steeped in what they're doing.
Talking to a wall, right?
As a cousin of my wife's would say, person so steeped in garbage, right? You're so immoral. He told somebody this. You're so immoral. You're so steeped in garbage. You need a snorkel in order to breathe. And that guy eventually became religious because, it really hit him, right? It hit him deep in his soul. Now, that's a great quote. I wish I would have said it myself, but I didn't. So I have to give credit. I have to get credit over here. But Pharaoh himself, what's going on? He's going to die also as a firstborn. Why isn't he worried? Because when a person is steeped in immorality and they're steeped in impurity, you can't tell them anything. Nothing registers. Nothing rational registers. Take the plague of the frog. There was one frog, the Medrash says. So what did the Egyptians do? They kept hitting it. They kept hitting it. What happened to the frog when it got hit? Multiplied. You hit one frog, it turns into 5. You hit another frog, turns into 10. Then you had millions of frogs. Right? Totally irrational. Totally irrational. But you know what? If a person, God forbid, sees a swarm, I don't know, bees, whatever creepy crawly things, you talk about cockroaches, let's say, cockroaches and other things, and you start hitting them. Forget about spraying them to die. You start hitting them, they seem to multiply more, right? More come around. You know where they're coming from, right? It's I would say, quote unquote, the natural reaction. But what's the problem over here? The problem is they just want to get rid of the problem. So what do? They whack the thing, and it multiplies to infinity. So what happened? Because people see what they want to see. People are not interested, most people, not interested in searching for truth, and they want to justify what they do. I'll give an example. It says Rav Noach Weinberg, of blessed memory, who was the founder of Yeshiva Seisha Torah. Rav Noach Weinberg said like this, a 5-year-old comes home, and he's dressed up in this old suit, and a funny hat, and he says, Mom, Dad, I'm Napoleon. Come on, your name is Beryl. How could you be Napoleon? He's like, yeah, right, I was only kidding. Yeah, whatever. Right? 25-year-old comes up, and, he's wearing this fancy hat, this nice old suit, whatever, and he goes, today I'm Napoleon. Now, unless he's schizophrenic, or he's got other mental issues, right, what are you going to say to him? You're going to say, come on, how could you be Napoleon? How could you be Napoleon? Napoleon's 300 years ago, 500 years ago, whatever, right? However long, Napoleon existed. So what are we talking about over here? What are we talking? How could you be Napoleon? He says, nah, I'm Napoleon, incognito. I'm really in hiding. I'm just not going to reveal myself, right? So the more intelligent the person, the more they're going to make stories upon stories in order to justify what they do, even if it doesn't make any sense. Why? Because they want to justify what they do. Now, we mentioned this before. We'll just throw this out there while I'm on this roll, right? And that is, you take someone like Stephen Hawking, right? You take someone like Albert Einstein and say, Steve, Al, give me an answer according to science that's going to answer up evolution, right? That the world's an expanding universe, or forget evolution for a second, that the world's an expanding universe, and Stephen Hawking proved that beyond the shadow of a doubt in his book, A Brief History of Time, right? No question about it. It's an expanding universe. Who expanded it? Oh, maybe it was a Big Bang. We could throw that out there. Maybe, right? Maybe there was a Big Bang. That's what did it. It keeps going. Okay, but who keeps it going? Who made the Big Bang? Right? Gee, I'm not really sure. Science really hasn't proven it.
They speculate dark matter keeps the expansion going now,
So if that's the case, you don't have an answer according to science. They don't have an answer according to science. So what could be the other alternative? There's only one other alternative. The other alternative is 6 days of creation in the Bible. Okay, you could talk about evolution. That's what everyone talks about, in the secular world and, in academia. Everybody swears by it. But there are a lot of problems. Even science says there's a lot of problems when it comes to evolution, right? But, so Steve and Al don't have an answer according to science. But what's the claim? The bogus claim is we'll find an answer. But that's not an answer. That's not an answer over here. Right? You're going to say, well, we'll find it eventually. Well, I care you're going to find it eventually.
Yeah,
you don't have an answer right now. Right? You don't have an answer right now according to science. So, Coffman being obnoxious as I could be, I would say, Steve, Al, give me an answer. I want an answer now according to science. So they're going to have to say, we don't have an answer. So I said, guess what? I have an answer. I have a potential answer. You know what that potential answer is? It's called the Bible. Now, if you don't have an answer according to science, you have an obligation to open up your mind and look at other things, right? Why are you going to say you're closed-minded over here? It's only about science. Maybe it's about other things. And if it's about other things, then you prove them wrong. Then you show where it's wrong. But they didn't say that. They said, I would never give in. I would never give in to the Bible thumpers. I would never give in to the creationists. That's not an answer. And there are people all the time, they'll say, oh, I think this is crazy. I don't believe in an afterlife. I don't believe there's going to be a next world. Okay, did you ever research it? You ever read the Bible from cover to cover? No. Did you ever watch the movie? No. Did you ever study Jewish philosophy? No. Goyish philosophy? Aristotle, Socrates? No. Did you ever study anything? No. But I know there's no afterlife. Seriously, are we going to take that seriously? No. We're not going to take that seriously. But what do people do? They're going to throw out things that make fun of you. Like I had a family member once say to me, I mentioned this before, if I breathe on your food, on your kosher food, this is a Jew talking, imagine. A non-Jew wouldn't have the guts to say such a thing. They wouldn't be embarrassed to say such a thing. Right? But what does the secular Jews say? Because they want to make themselves feel good. If I breathe on your kosher food, does that mean the kosher food's not kosher? You know what my answer was? Of course it's kosher, just has bad breath on it. That was my answer.
Yeah, be rational.
Right? Now, so why does someone make a statement like that? Because they want to make fun of you. Do they have answers themselves? No. But they want to justify what they do. Right? I had somebody, person was into marriage. So I said, even according to you, that the Bible's written by man, let's say you don't believe it's God-given. So the Bible, the Torah itself says 6 times, 8 times, 10 times, or more, you're not allowed to intermarry. You're not allowed to marry a non-Jew. So I said, okay, so what do you do with that? Now, I said, you could tell me. I gave them a little bit of help. I said, you could tell me maybe it's only that generation. Maybe it's only the generation going into the land, and conquering the non-Jews. I gave a few options. What was the response I got? You're a nutcase. You're a fanatic. I said, I know. Of course I'm a fanatic. I've been called a lot worse. Called a heck of a lot worse. So, but that didn't answer the question. Right? I said, you can call me any name you want. I want an answer. I don't know you an answer. So what happens? People throw out things and, I think this, I think that, but they're not giving any evidence.
Yeah,
One of my personal,
opinion.
It's an opinion. Listen, if somebody was an investor, somebody had, let's say, a hedge fund. They had $100 million. $100 million in a hedge fund. So I come to them and I say, I want you to invest money. I got a great company. I want you to invest in. Okay, let's hear. Let's hear. So I tell them, the company begins with the letter C. My Hebrew name, Chaim, begins with the letter C. So I think you should invest your money there. Are they going to take me seriously? Never. They're going to throw me out.
Yeah,
right?
They want to see
Straight
all
away.
the history.
Yeah. Like, I mentioned this to somebody. And they said, oh, I would be interested to hear what you have to say. I said, not after this. You're going to make fun of me. You're going to do all kinds of things. I go, it's the same thing. If someone has a PhD, let's say, pilot higher and deeper, or Papa has dough. You got a PhD in Torah, in Judaism. Someone's a world expert, let's say. And you read an article on Wikipedia, you're going to knock them down? I don't think so. Right? But people convince themselves, of what they think the truth is.
Mm-hmm.
And they won't leave it, even if it sounds idiotic. Now, let's get back to what we said. You take someone like Pharaoh, his whole country being decimated. Decimated. Moshe Rabbeinu was on the biggest role of his life. Moshe tells him, you're never going to see me again after this plague. And we're going to go serve God in the deserts. And Pharaoh goes about doing his normal work. He gets up, no issues. No worries. What do you mean, no worries? Well, that's the question again. How can that be? Because when a person is steeped in their desires, and they have nothing else, that's what counts. That's what they do. That's who's calling the shots. Calling the shots is Mr. S, the evil inclination, the angel of death, whatever you want to call him. He's the one calling the shots. So in that case, is it really possible to overcome that if you're in the throes of that? Seems to be impossible. Seems to be impossible. In this case, it was impossible. Why? Because God hardened his heart. That's what we said at the beginning of the parsha. God hardened his heart, took away his free will. Totally took away his free will. Now, even though God took away his free will, he's still liable. Right? Now, it's an interesting question, big philosophical question we're not going to deal with. Right? But that is, if God took away someone's free will, how is it that God's going to punish them? They don't have free will anymore. Right? We're going to leave that by the side for a moment. Right? But at the end of the day, if someone sees it with their own eyes, how do they justify what they do? How do they get up and still do the same thing?
Insanity.
That's what it is, right? Marx Brothers, sanity clause, right? If you remember, right? The idea is when a person's steeped in all that, you can't get out of it. Now, I'm not going to say 100% is impossible, because we see anyone who's listening today got out of it, got out of idolatry, became religious, whatever it is, whether Jew or non-Jew. If you're a Jew, you should be watching this now. But, if it's Shabbos for you. But in general, for non-Jews, they got out of it. How did they get out of it? Because they were thinking, and stuff in the church didn't make sense. But the repercussions are absolutely catastrophic. Then, you're gonna have issues with your family. You may have issues with your spouse. You may have issues with your kids, right? You may not fit into where you live now and your society and all that. There's serious repercussions. And I always tell people, anyone coming out of Christianity or a Jew, secular Jew becomes religious, family may not always come along. Probably I would say 98% of the time, family doesn't come along. And you end up losing family along the way. Why? So very, very simple. So let's say a person gets together with family, non-Jew, or a Jew, doesn't really matter, gets together with family on Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, according to most rabbinical authorities, not a religious holiday, probably the safest holiday to get together with, get together with family, even though I would say probably not a good thing because you're going in the way of the non-Jews. That had no significance whatsoever. It's all about football in Turkey, not necessarily in that order. So if a person does such a thing, what's going to happen? Right? I'll tell you. So you go to a sibling's house, parents' house, whatever. You can't eat the food there. You bring your own food, own pots and pans. And you start cooking your own stuff, reheating, whatever it is. That relationship will never be the same afterwards. They're going to say, oh, you're not even Jewish, and you're doing this. And they'll start making fun. They'll start saying things. They're like, why can't you eat my food? My food is also clean, so to speak. Like, you can't eat my food anymore. That's where it stops. Right? That's exactly where it's going to stop. I can tell you from personal experience, people get offended. People 100% will get offended because, why can't you eat my food anymore? Why are you trying to be different? And then a person has to make a decision. How important is that relationship? And again, I'm not necessarily going to tell people what to do. I'm just telling you this is what can happen. And a lot of times, this is exactly what happens, is that, people get hot under the collar. People get upset, right? People get offended. And then what happens? They say, okay, we don't want you coming over anymore. Or they start saying things every time you speak to them. How come you don't believe in JC? Why don't you do this? Or why don't you do, eventually a person gets tired, because,
they don't
family,
want to hear the answer. That's true too.
Right. But, speaking of family can be exactly like speaking to a missionary. When you catch a missionary on something, what do? They don't answer the question. They go on to another thing, another topic, because they don't have an answer. They're only programmed on certain things. So if you knock them out in one way, they're going to say, well, that's a good question.
Topic,
well, what about this? No, I didn't ask you about this. I'm not interested about this. I want an answer to my question. I had these Mormons, weren't the brightest guys in the world, right? Came to my door when I was living in Chile, second biggest place of Mormons outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, where I happen to be in Santiago, Chile. I'm not exactly not exactly sure how they got there. But regardless, they started asking me questions. I gave them answers. They didn't have answers. They went on to other things. So finally I said, why ain't going to answer?
Routine.
I said, and my knockout blow was, I said, don't you know that both the Christians and the Muslims agree that, God gave the Torah to the Jewish people in front of 3 million people, 2 million, 3 million, whatever it was, in front of everybody. Everyone agrees. Everyone agrees. They may say, oh, they're not chosen anymore, whatever the case is, but everyone agrees, right? So what I mentioned that because they had told me before, right? Their knockout blow to me was, or I don't know if they're a knockout blow, but what did they say? Don't you understand? There was the Book of Mormon, it was hidden in a cave. Comes along John Smith, 200 years, and he comes and finds it and whatever. So I said, I got a better story. Look at Exodus chapter 19, right? 3 million people, right? 600,000 men, not including women and children. Talking about 3 million people God spoke to. Everyone agrees. Christians and the Muslims, right? Everyone agrees, which is most of the known world. So I said, wow, 3 million people that God spoke to, right? They pass it down generation. That beats your stupid little story about John Smith in the cave for 200 years. That kind of silly, right? So people are going to believe things based on what other people tell them without checking the facts.
Often, yeah, far too often.
Yeah, they'll see things on the internet. They'll see other things. They'll see something in the newspaper. I told somebody once
and
something.
They'll shoehorn ideas together that don't fit.
Right.
Incompatible.
So I told someone something, and they, of course, they don't want to listen to me. What do I know, right? So 2 months later, same thing comes out in a newspaper article. So they tell me about it, and I said, I told you that 2 months ago. No, but we saw it in the news. You don't know anything. We saw it authoritative in the news. Come on. You have to, when it comes to anything, you're going to invest money. You're going to buy a house. You're going to do a tremendous amount of research. You're going to check the standing of the house. You're going to bring someone in, to make sure it's not on quicksand. They're not. You're going to have a lawyer check to make sure there are no liens. Other things. Before you fork out a ton of money, you're going to do the research. Now, if this is all about spiritual life and about absolute truth, how do people not do the research? How do people not look into things? You know what the answer is? Because what happens if I look into it? And I mentioned this before, that I've met one intellectually honest person in my life over the last 30 years. One! This person said to me, if I look into Judaism, this person was intermarried, he said, if I look into Judaism and I find out it's true, and I have to change my life, I'm not willing to change my life. Now, that person was intellectually honest. I've never met anyone else. No one else has had the guts to say such a thing. Nobody. They'll say, oh, I don't believe it. Come on, you really believe it? It's not the issue. Is it sourced? Do we have proof? You want to look at the proof? No. Nobody's interested. They want to live a life and do whatever they want. Comes along Pharaoh, steeped in all the immorality and all the garbage, right? Doesn't matter if his whole country's being decimated. Now God's playing with him, right? God's playing with him, and he says, okay, this is going to be the final blow, right? But he himself, after seeing what's going on, he had no opportunity to repent. Commentaries say at least after the first two. He saw the first two plagues. God gave him an opportunity. He gave him an opportunity to repent. And what happened? Who's this God? I should believe in him. Take this away. Not a problem. I don't really believe in any of this. After that, God says, oh, you're going to be chutzpahdik to me. You're going to say this is all a natural occurrence, right? Some people say, when the Jews came out of Egypt, it was high tide. That's what happened. Or there's a theory out there, which I don't know how many people believe in it, but I read an article once. There's such a theory. You know why all the plagues happens? All the plagues happen because Saturn was out of orbit.
No, the Plague Project was probably the most profound. It came out in the dawn of the internet, and it showed a logical cascade of events because in the late 80s, the Mississippi River had turned red like blood, and the people started to, or scientists got alarmed, and fish were dying by the billions, they said. And so the scientists dove in to research it, and they likened it to the plague in Egypt with the river turning to blood. And they took a cascade of events that it killed. It was a bacteria called Pfiesteria piscidia that infects the fish, and these toxic, it blooms red, and these lesions come out on the small fish. Billions of them were dying, but then the fish can't eat the tadpoles, and so the tadpoles blossom and come on shore, and then they had a logical sequence of events.
But the question that, in today's day, no one's even going to read that. You can explain it logically, but obviously that takes God out of the picture.
No,
right?
I think it's more miraculous to show that Hashem controlled every variable of all existence over all time.
No, 100%. But again, if people don't do the research, right? That's the whole point here. People don't do the research, not interested in doing the research, and people say, "I believe X." Well, really, you believe it? You haven't done the research. You haven't looked into anything. You haven't done anything over here. But people are adamant. That's why generation before the Messiah comes, this is what you're going to have. You're going to have the greatest amount of chutzpah in the world. You're going to have. I was
reading some of that from Sanhedrin 97.
You're going to have people thinking that the world's on autopilot. It's run by nature and all these different things, and there's gonna be heresy all over the world. Right now, there can be heresy within the Jewish people also. Right? You can have, quote unquote, even Orthodox rabbis be heretics. Right? Like this idiot who's going to invite a missionary to a synagogue. Right? I'm not going to go there because I've already spoken about it. But, there's heresy all over. But most people don't want to do the research, because if they do the research and they have to change, they're not going to do it.
Cognitive dissonance.
So they'll believe, right? They're going to believe in every little, whatever they do, and they'll make fun of other things without having the facts. Why? That's why most people are going to hold on to evolution, even though it's never been proven. Because there's only one other alternative. You only have one other alternative. Either it's that way, or the way that the Torah tells is true. Right? So the issue is that we can't take anything for granted. Can't take anything for granted in learning either. Right? Let's say a rabbi quotes something. It says like this over there. You got to look up the source. Can't be lazy. Doesn't really say that. Or is it their interpretation of what it says? Right? You have to see. Did they say it? Didn't they say it? Etc. So we have to think. And it takes effort. It takes effort to learn. It weakens the body. Right? It makes the mind sharper, but person learns however many hours or minutes, whatever it is. I'm not talking about Kabbalah here. Just trying to understand what the Torah says. Now, there are a lot of things, as we mentioned, if you go through the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, there are many things at face value make no sense. They make no sense at all. Right? Probably about 80% of the Torah doesn't make sense logically. Right? You take in the book of Numbers, the spies. What? God couldn't take care of the spies? He destroyed the world power. The world power in Egypt. So now they're going to conquer the land. These people look like giants and everything else. So where's their emunah? Where's their faith? Where's the faith God's going to take care of them? Then you got Korah. And Korah goes against Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen. I want to be the high priest. I'm just as good as Aaron. I also have a lineage. Right? I also have genealogy. I have a pedigree. Moshe Rabbeinu showing favoritism. But every time Moshe says, I'm not doing anything here. Right? God is telling me what to do. And I'm telling you what he said. Right? If he comes out against the king, everyone will kill him. He doesn't come out directly against the first king, i.e. Moshe Rabbeinu. Comes out against the priesthood. So what does the Mishna say? We're going to get to when I'm probably about 92. Right? And that is that jealousy, desire, and honor can take a person out of this world. And the commentaries there say that jealousy, who do you learn it out from? Korah. You learn it out from Korah. If you learn it out from Korah, right, you see, jealousy can kill a person. But look who he was. Came out of Egypt. He held the ark. Right? People who held the ark that weren't worthy died. He wasn't small fry over here, no pun intended. He wasn't a small person. So how can he go against Moshe Rabbeinu? How can he go against Aaron HaKohen? Jealousy. Desire also. Person can be so steeped in desire. The more we act on it, right? It's the Baalei Musar as the great rabbis of ethics tell us, person does something once, got to work very hard to uproot it. You do it again, you do it a third time, it's already part of your psyche. Much, much harder. Now you already think it's important. It's all right. Now you already think it's permissible. You think it's permissible. So now, if you've done it a number of times, like a smoker will say, I can stop anytime. Oh, really? Let's see. Makes it that much more difficult when person got nicotine in their system and it's, what do you call it? It's addictive. Person can say, yeah, I can stop this anytime. Okay, so let's see. If it's something addictive, something detrimental. Point over here is, whatever we learn, right? Let's get back to the point here. Whatever we learn, when it comes to Torah, commentaries, got to think, right? We have to think. What does it mean in its context? Even though the Christians take everything out of context. What does it mean in context? And then let's see, what do I learn out from my life? Is there something I can take from it, in my everyday life? Now, not everything that a person learns is necessarily going to be practical. A person can learn about sacrifices. We don't do sacrifices today, right? We don't have a temple today. But a person has to learn and has to know what to do. Lest the temple be rebuilt, we have to know. Because they're going to be sacrifices. We have to know what to do. Purity and impurity. Things don't apply today in most cases. So if that's true, then what? Then we have to know what to do, right? Even if it's not practical. Plenty of things that are practical, right? So a person may learn majority of things that are practical, right? But even if it's not practical, I still have to know it, right? It's still something I have to know. So God gave us the Torah in order that we should understand His law. We should understand what He wants from us, Jews and non-Jews. And He gave it to nourish the body and the soul. Remember, person was created body and soul. And there's always conflict. Body wants to go after the natural world, wants to go after desire. The soul wants to go after spiritual things. So there's always a conflict. If the body wins, and a person goes after his desires, so that debases the body, debases the soul. If a person goes after his spiritual sides, so that uplifts the body and uplifts the soul. But that's a constant thing. That's going to be a constant fight, until a person dies, right? It's never going to end. Now, even if a person gets older, right, there's certain things you can't do anymore. Even though I mentioned the story, I saw these, older women, walking down the street. See, like a 75-year-old woman spiked here in a miniskirt, right? And the hair is like fire red. They can say, what are you doing looking at women? I'm not saying I'm necessarily looking, but someone passes by you like that, face, you take a double take. You take a double take.
Audacious.
Someone, it's pretty obnoxious, right? You see a woman's got, wrinkles, up the gazoo wearing a miniskirt and fire red hair.
I live in a retirement community, Rabbi, and we've got beaches and, 70, 80 years old. It's just.
Now, what's going on? They're still trying to relive the past. They're still trying, they want to fight Mother Nature. Can't fight Mother Nature, right? No matter how many plastic surgeries you have, you can't fight Mother Nature, right? Every second that we're alive, when a person's born, the clock is ticking. Someone might live for 60 years. Someone might live for 40 years. Someone may live, 90 years. Nobody knows. But we do know, and this is something that can never be reversed. What we do know is when the time is ticking, question is, what are we going to do? How are we going to live our lives? Because we're just closer to death. That's what we are. So we have to take advantage of everything that we have spiritually. Each day is a new day, right? We say every day in the paragraph before the Shema, we said God is machadesh b'chol yom tamid. God renews creation. Renews, not renewed. Present tense. Every day is a new day. Person wakes up in the morning, if you're a Jew, right, you're going to thank God for giving your soul back. Because if He didn't give your soul back, you'd be dead. Right? But, so we have to wash our hands in the morning, either because we might have touched part of our body that's normally covered, when we're sleeping, we don't realize it, so we have to wash our hands for that. Or another opinion is because we're now a totally new creation. If a person's a new creation, when the soul goes back in, guess what? So now I'm a totally new person. Because otherwise, the soul didn't go back in the body. What happens? We die. Pretty clear. So either one of those reasons, we have an obligation to wash our hands. Right? So Torah has the ability, absolutely has the ability, to nourish our bodies, nourish our souls. And this is why we have to work hard. We have to work very hard to understand the laws, which strengthens us in so many ways. Now, a person's going to say, come on, you're talking about Kabbalah? No. Right? Just understanding what God says. I could go, when I'm doing in my class on the book of Leviticus, right, it's going verse by verse. Some things a little bit easier to understand, some things not as easy to understand, but there are a lot of things that we see that, a person will say, oh, this really isn't saying that much. But there's a lot going on, right? You look at the beginning of chapter 16, on the book of Leviticus, what does it tell you? It tells you about the death of the sons of Aaron, right? Nadav and Avihu, whether they drank wine and they were killed, when they were serving God, or they brought a strange fire, right? The Torah says that they weren't allowed to bring on Yom Kippur. Whatever the case is, there are like 6 different answers, 6 possible answers, right? But there's a question. I'll just throw it out there, right? Because I mentioned it last week. Anyone who saw it, but if you didn't see it, so what does the Torah tell me? Chapter 16, verse 1. Book of Leviticus. It says Hashem spoke to Moshe after the death of Aaron's 2 sons when they approached before Hashem and they died. Now, what's the obvious question? It says God spoke to Moshe. What did he say? Doesn't tell me. Then it says, verse 2, speak to Aaron, your brother. You don't have to come at all times in the sanctuary within the curtain, blah, blah, blah. Right now, if we were thinking critically, right, which we should when we learn anything, God spoke to Moshe after the death of Aaron's 2 sons. Right? Light bulb goes off. Okay, he spoke to Aaron after the death of his 2 sons. Doesn't tell me anything. All it says is he spoke to them. So very good. So what did he say? We're missing information. Right? Now, if we were a Karaite, we'll make fun of the Karaites, because it's always fun to make fun of the Karaites. And that is that the Karaites don't believe in oral law. Right? They don't believe in oral law. So they'll say, you know what? That's just a run-on sentence. Because if you look at verse 2, it'll tell you why they, what God said. But that's not how it works. Because if that would be the case, what about the other verses? What about the other verses in chapter 10? Beginning of chapter 10 says, they died, and there are 2 reasons. One is they brought in a strange fire. Right? Second reason is because they drank wine, seemingly. Right? They drank wine before they served, which they weren't allowed to do. So which is it? Is it one or the other? But if I already know that, then why am I going to repeat it? Why am I going to repeat it? Doesn't seem like I should repeat it. Not only that, but now you're telling me in a different place. So why are you telling me in this place? Right? So there are a lot of questions. I didn't get very far in 2 hours and change. I didn't get very far because there are a lot of questions. Tomorrow's not going to get that far. Right? As I saw, there's a lot there. There's a lot there in the first verse. Right? Probably be a part 3 next week if I have the merit to get through what I need to get through, but probably not, because there are a lot of details. A lot of details need to be explained. Right? But the point is, if we were reading it and we were thinking, we have no distractions, right? We're sitting there reading, God spoke to Aaron, Moshe and Aaron, and he goes on to something else. And Torah goes on to something else. So the obvious question is, what did he say? And the Karaite's going to have to also come up with an answer. Right? They have to come up with their own answer. Right? But what did he say? That's the whole question. Right? So whenever I learn something, doesn't matter, it's a piece of Talmud, it's Musar, it's ethics, it's Jewish law, it's 5 books of Moses, whatever it is. Whatever I learn, I got to think. Can't take anything for granted. Now, the other problem is, let's say we have other information. I know other information. Now, if I know other information, then when I read something, I can start asking other questions, right? What would be the other question? I say, okay, the Talmud brings me at least 4 different reasons or more. So like 6 reasons altogether why the 2 sons die. Why Nadav and Avihu die. Now, if I know the 6 reasons, Torah doesn't mention it. Torah only mentions 2. Not only that, it mentions it in a few different places. So what happened? Is the Torah in chronological order, which I've spoken about? Or can things be out of order? It's just Moshe Rabbeinu wrote them down whenever he wrote them down. Right? It's not a contradiction, per se. It's just out of chronological order. The sin of the golden calf. Right? Sin of the golden calf happened shortly after God gave the Torah. Right? But it's written chapters later. Alright, so if you will, like Rashi and others who say it's not in chronological order, I don't have a question. But if it's supposed to be in chronological order, why are there so many other verses that talk about other things that have nothing to do with it? And then all of a sudden, the Torah tells me this whole story. Right? So that we have to understand. But when we learn, we have to learn in a proper way. And we have to think. And if a person has other knowledge, they have other knowledge, the questions become very different. Very, very different. Right? Why is that? Very simple, because I have other knowledge. Then, that's a different level of learning. Right? Understanding what the Torah says is one thing. Going through the details and seeing, what the commentaries say or having other knowledge, that's a different level of learning. Because now I have different knowledge. So now imagine someone has a lot of knowledge. They have a lot of knowledge. And they look at a verse, they look at a piece of Talmud, whatever, and now they have 25 questions. Why do they have 25 questions? They have 25 questions because they have all this other information, and they have to all make it fit together. Mm-hmm. And it could be there are contradictions. Now, it could
inquiring minds want to know.
Right. It could be 23 out of the 25 questions you can knock off. Right? Nope, that's not a question because of this. That's not a question because of that. But then you're still left with some questions. Right? It's a different level. It's a different level over here. Right? So the first thing over here is that when we're saying the more Torah, the more life, weakens a person. Because when a person's thinking and you're using your mind, and now you're trying to put all the pieces together, it's hard. You gotta come on. Medicine's also hard. Right? Law, learning law is also hard. It's a different thing.
Oh, for sure.
It's a different thing.
Yeah.
And why is it different? Right? I'm not going to make fun of science or law over here. We'll give them their due. Why is it different? Because that information is finite. In other words, if a person goes to law school and you're going to specialize in certain law, whatever it is, after a while, there are certain things you're going to look up that have precedent, and all that. But it's not like over the last, I don't know, however many years, hundreds of years, whatever. It's not like the information radically changes. In other words, someone becomes an accountant, you have to be up to date on the new laws, right? And in order to tell clients, what they need to look out for, whatever the case is. But the accounting itself doesn't change. Medicine, okay, medicine can change, certainly over time, right? In different ways. But it's not to the point where it uproots everything, right? In other words, what a person is going to learn, for the first couple years is standard, right? Standard biology, maybe a little bit of chemistry, other things. That's standard. That doesn't change. Now, if a person focuses, on different things, okay, they're going to be specialized. They're going to have a specialty over here. And even within that, so a person will go to conferences, they'll read up on, new innovations, different things. Okay, but how much does that really change? Yeah. How much does that really change over time? Probably not that much. When it comes to Torah is all encompassing. Torah can deal with every subject under the sun. So you're going to say, okay, so you got the early commentators, they haven't changed. They haven't said it, they haven't, what they said hasn't changed, but there could be certain realities maybe that have changed. right? Let's say I give an example. Laws of Shabbos. Comes to the laws of Shabbos. Electricity is forbidden, right? Flick on the switch, turn it off. It's forbidden. Question is why? So a little discussion why. So then someone's going to say, come on, the rabbis are changing the Torah. Well, the rabbis and the Kohanim, as the Torah tells me, Book of Deuteronomy, have a right to interpret the Torah. Right? 100%.
Responsibility, yes?
Right, 100%. But the Torah says, you're not allowed to kindle a fire. You're not allowed to light a fire on Shabbos. Now, what about electricity? What about gas? Is gas the same thing? Right? You have an electric stove. Is that is that considered fire? Well, if you turn on the stove and it gets pretty hot, whether it's gas or electric, you can try this at home. Stick your nose leave it for like 30 seconds. Leave it actually better. Leave it for a couple of minutes. Turn on the flame, right? Turn on your electric stove, whatever it is, and then stick your nose either in the flame or on it, or on the hot stove. You're gonna burn your nose off. Right? 100% you're gonna burn your nose off. Isn't that the same thing as fire? Similar enough to fire. Now, someone say, electricity is different. Right? Okay, so let's take off the plastic. The plastic that's covering your electric socket. Right now, take a screwdriver, any type of screwdriver, right? And now stick it into the light socket. So you're gonna say, Rabbi, what are you, out of your mind? I'm not gonna do that. Why not? Why, because I do that, you idiot, I'm gonna get electrocuted. But you told me that I flick on the switch, I turn it off, it doesn't do anything. There's nothing going on over here. Come on, I start my car. Isn't starting my car less work than you walking a mile to synagogue? Well, that's not the definition of work. Right? So these type of things, the rabbis didn't deal with. You know why they didn't deal with it? Because they didn't have it. They didn't have it. So now, is this similar or is it not similar? Right? So now, the rabbis in every generation, as you said, they have an obligation to interpret the law. We give them that ability. The Torah gives them that ability, right? Even though you get these trolls, right, that'll say, come on, they're changing the Torah. Remember, right, they're only men. They're changing the Torah. But what does the Torah tell me exactly? Right? What does the Torah tell me? The Torah tells me they have the ability, the Kohanim have the ability, right? You have to listen to them in every generation. Who are the Kohanim today? The rabbis. If you got to listen to them in every generation, what did they mean? And if you don't listen to them, you're liable for a death penalty. The Torah says. So it's the catch-22. I'm not going to listen to them. They're only men. But God says to listen to them. And even if you're telling me the Torah is written by men, God forbid. So what did they mean when they wrote it? They must mean the same thing, right? Now you're going to have to grasp at straws. You got something explicit. I'll give another example. More blatant example. We're not going to be politically correct there, and everyone knows I'm never politically correct, so that's okay.
Controversial.
You take Leviticus chapter 18. Right? All kinds of forbidden relationships. 20 verses or more. Right? Of forbidden relationships. Within those forbidden relationships, what's one forbidden relationship? Homosexuality. Right? Bestiality, also forbidden. Right? It's clear, black and white. So now, that was the first episode we did on Tanakh Talk. Right? And so someone wrote a comment there. They said, come on, there's a verse in there, right before, right after, that talks about sorcery. So therefore, it's talking about sorcery, talking about idolatry. So homosexuality is only forbidden if it's an idolatrous act. So this person is truthful about 2%. Because he's going to say there's a juxtaposition of verses. We have to understand the juxtaposition. That's true. And the commentaries ask the question, if you got 20 verses or more talking about immorality, what are you talking about sorcery over here? Sorcery doesn't belong. It's out of place. Right? Totally out of place. So that needs an explanation. 100% that needs an explanation. But guess what? Right? But guess what? There's an idea. There's an idea over here. A very simple idea. Logic 101, 101A. No Kabbalah, no oral law, nothing. The Torah tells me 20 verses or more, talking about immorality, talking about forbidden relationships, homosexuality included. How in the world can you say one verse uproots all 20 verses and say it's not talking about that? I get it. There's a juxtaposition of verses. We have to understand the juxtaposition. I'm not denying that. But you can't tell me 93.4%, of the verses are all out of context. That's a little bit much, even for me. Right? You can't take one verse out of context when all the other verses are telling me the same thing. That's not Kabbalah. That's not oral law. That is internal logic. Internal logic. Right? Well, but what do people do?
I've been reading a lot of the Rambam of late, and I hold that he pushes a lot of intellectual virtue, a lot of virtue in all that he does. So,
but you have to understand, the Rambam in his epic word, the Yad HaChazak, right, is work on the holidays, laws of damages, sacrifices, impurity laws, right, purity and impurity laws, all that, right. Most of the time, or I shouldn't say most of the time, right? There are times where he's going to source it. He's going to say it comes from this verse, comes from that verse, or comes from something else. What do the commentaries do? Commentaries, if it doesn't bring a source, a lot of times will say this is where the Rambam gets it from. But they could disagree, and they say, well, what do you do with this? What do you do with that? They try and answer up for the Rambam, right? But a lot of times he's going to bring a source. That's the whole point. He's going to bring a source. The whole code of Jewish law is based on the Rambam. It's all based on the Rambam. Right? A lot of times, the majority of time, Rav Yosef Karo, blessed memory, when he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, the code of Jewish law, he quotes the Rambam verbatim. Or a lot of times it goes like the Rambam. Not everyone agrees with the Rambam, in all cases. Right? But that's another discussion. But the point is, you can't just take something out of context. I mean, the Messianics are good at this. The Christians are good at this. They'll take things way out of context and say, no, this is what it means. How can they take it out of context? I mean, I understand why they do. Right? But you can't say, I'll give an example. Right? I'll give a relevant example. Right? You take Jeremiah chapter 30. Jeremiah chapter 30, what does it speak about? The new covenant. Now, it's a little bit strange, uses the language, a new covenant. What we call in Hebrew the Brit Chadasha. Now, internal logic would tell me the Torah in the book of Deuteronomy says you can't add or subtract to the Torah. You can't go against what Moshe Rabbeinu says. Now, they have different laws. JC came and fulfilled the law, all these different things. Right? It's problematic. But forget that. We're not even going to go there. So they'll say, see, it's a new covenant. Jeremiah himself, brings down a new covenant over here. Now, what's the problem? Jeremiah is a prophet. He's a prophet of God. God spoke to him. The Christians, Muslims agree. He's a prophet. Nothing to talk about. If you're a prophet from God, and you're saying, this is what God said to me, and I'm going to give this over, he cannot contradict the Torah. Right? That's why a lot of people do not learn Tanakh, because seemingly there are contradictions from Tanakh into the Torah itself. They have to have a lot of fear of heaven. You have to know how to answer these things. But that doesn't matter. We're not even going there. So someone's going to say, it says new covenant. Very good. It says a new covenant. Can there be a new covenant according to God? No. Why can't there be a new covenant? Because many, many times in the Torah, and I always bring this up in my classes, anytime, the Torah says it's forever, it means forever. Now, we might have messed things up. Certain things may not apply today because we messed it up. It doesn't mean it's not forever. So, what are the Karaites going to say? It means forever. No, it means like this. Forever seems to mean forever. Right? Pretty clear. Now, if that is the case, how can you say it's a new covenant? You can't say there's a new covenant. So, what's the explanation? So, 98% of the time, as I did on Tanakh Talk with this Freemason, gave me a whole bunch of verses in Tanakh that talk about angels having free will. Right? I did this a few times. Went through a bunch of the verses, right? Showing that that's not what the verse means. And 98% of it was what? Context. Context. Now, if you look at Jeremiah chapter 30, what's the context? Context is Jeremiah is chastising Jewish people for going against the covenant. Going against the original covenant. And Jeremiah says clear, I don't know why the Christians don't get this. Jeremiah says clear that God wants you to connect, you, the Jewish people, to reconnect to the original covenant.
Bing.
That's what he said. That's pretty clear. It's in context if you read the whole chapter. But if I take one thing out of context, hey, it's a new covenant. You're not chosen anymore. And it refers to, well, first of all, go back and read the context. Go see what it's talking about. Then once you see what it's talking about, then try and tell me that's what it means. But there are other questions even before you get there. Other questions within internal logic. Right? Can't add or subtract to the Torah. He himself is a prophet. Can't contradict what Moshe says. One of the 13 principles, of faith of the Rambam. Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest of all prophets, the father of all prophets. That means any other prophet, if they're a real prophet, cannot contradict what Moshe Rabbeinu says. Because God said in front of 3 million people, he's my trusted prophet. Whatever he says goes. He said in front of the entire nation. So now how does someone come up and say, no, we're not chosen anymore. No, this, not that. Look at the context. Look at the context over there. So anything we learn, and especially Tanakh, it's hard to learn. I'm in the 2nd chapter of Isaiah. I do a couple verses, that's it. Because, there are a lot of deep things. There are a lot of deep things going on. Right? I haven't even got to the controversial verses yet.
Wow.
But I'm saying if you're learning, and you're learning well, and you see how deep it is, but if you don't have the background, right, and I mentioned this many times before, if you don't have the background, and you don't have oral law, how in the world can you tell me what the verse says? And we have our own oral law, the Christians will say. We have our own law. Yeah, but your law doesn't make any sense in so many different ways. Right? But how can you tell me according to the Freemasons, where it's talking about angels that have free will? Look at what the context is. Sometimes a lot of things, or some things that are said in Tanakh are parables. They're metaphors.
Homonymously.
They're total metaphors. They're not necessarily they're not there to be taken literally. So someone's going, well, how do you know? Well, how I know? Because the rabbis tell me. They'll tell me, if we should look at it literally or not. But they'll tell me, for goodness sake, what the context is. They'll tell me what's going on. Because sometimes the prophet can change what he's talking about, almost in mid-sentence. How do I know? The commentary is going to give me that answer. Right? But if you don't have the commentaries, then anything goes. Right? Anything goes. Now, so Tanakh, most people only learn it when they're kids. Kids only learn Tanakh. Adults don't normally learn Tanakh. Why not? First of all, an Orthodox Jew has to be very well versed, in Talmud, in the code of Jewish law. But, a person to be considered a real rabbinic scholar has to know all 24 books of the Bible, right? And a lot of times, the Talmud is going to expand, and extrapolate what's going on in Tanakh, right? So you have to know what's going on. You have to know what's going on. So that's why kids learn Tanakh at a young age. They get the basics. And then when they learn Talmud, it goes more in depth, right? But, even when they learn Talmud, they sort of skip over it. They don't learn it in depth. It's called the Gadata. What's a Gadata? It's like a homiletic, story or something, to teach you some Musar, ethics or whatever. But as a friend of mine would say, you can learn it in 5 minutes or 5 years. Very deep. The beginning of the book of Ezekiel, 3rd chapter of Tractate Chagiga, speaks about his vision. It's all Kabbalah. It's all Kabbalah. So Talmud tries to explain different things that he saw, whatever.
Yeah, words don't do certain things.
Concepts and words are not going to do it. You have to have a heck of a lot more background on what's going on. So what's a person going to do? Okay, they'll learn it. They'll try and get something out of it. They move on. Why? Because if they stay on that topic, first of all, they're not going to cover ground. Second of all, it's very deep. It's very deep. So, at the end of the day, it's something we still have to know. Right? But a person needs a lot of fear of heaven, tremendous amount of fear of heaven, to learn Tanakh. Again, because seemingly there are many times it seems that Tanakh contradicts the Torah. So, you can't have a prophet contradict. Can't go against Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? So, we have to understand what's going on, what the context is, and all that. So what did we say before? So we said before, it's hard work. A lot of hard work to understand the laws. If it's a lot of hard work, then, again, I would put this out there to any secular person, Jew or non-Jew. I would put out there that if it's hard work to understand, remember, even the laws of damages, which are the closest thing to what we understand today, laws of business, etc., we have to remember it's a God-given book. So just because we understand business, we understand how contracts work and different things, regardless of all that, we have to remember it's a God-given book. And we sometimes forget that. We sometimes think that, this is something I should understand. Right? This is something, I should totally understand. Right? But the reality is what? The reality is it's hard. Why is it so hard? So there's an X factor. The X factor is that it's God's word over here. So now you got people, Jews and non-Jews, come along and say all kinds of idiotic things. Right? Why do I say idiotic? Because they didn't research. They're not looking into it the way we would say, but who says your way is the only way to look at it? Why are you so closed-minded till my brains fall on the floor? Right? Or be open-minded till your brains fall on the floor. Let's say better. They say, but you're not looking at any other sources. You're right, because I believe this is the source. And the Talmud is the source. Right? So people are going to say, how do you know? Oh, good. That's a good question. How does oral law work? Very good. But I'm going to ask them. They're going to say, I hold by what I hold by. Right? Like we said before. I hold by what I hold by. I'll do what I do, and that's it. They're not interested in truth. It had nothing to do with truth. But what are we saying over here? We're saying that we have to work hard to understand the law. So these pretenders, I'm going to call them, these pretenders are not working hard to understand the law. They're trying to circumvent the law. They're trying to do
fruit only, yeah?
They're trying to do whatever they want just to justify what they do. Oh, I can't imagine. You really think, God's going to kill people, and if I do this, you see, people don't die. Someone will say, yeah, I'm 95 years old, smoke like a fiend. People are saying how bad smoking is. Totally didn't affect me. Right? Then you see other people in their 40s died from lung cancer. Right? Etc. So why didn't it affect you like it affected others? Because God didn't want you to die that way. He didn't want to cut down your life. That's the only reason it makes sense. Right? We say, I got lucky. But everybody knows, a person takes a puff of a cigarette, you're shrinking your life. Right? As my Rebbe said, he heard a doctor once speak about this for an hour. All the dangers, many, many years ago. All the dangers about smoking. So after the lecture, what does he do? He starts smoking. Doctor lights up a cigarette. The Rebbe asked him, what's going on? You just told me how difficult it is, how bad it is, and how it affects you in a negative way, and it's going to shorten your life. What did he answer? He answered, you're right. And even if it's going to shorten my life, it's so enjoyable, I'm not going to give it up. I'm not going to give it up. Right? So people will say, I'm not going to give it up. Doesn't matter if what I say doesn't make sense in your eyes. I'm going to do what I want to do. But that's not what Torah is. Torah is about delving into it. Torah is about fighting for what it means. Right? You have to work hard over here. So how many people are working hard? How many people are working hard in order to understand what it says? Nobody. Except us. Nobody's working hard because they have an agenda. And when it comes to agenda, just like we say in Passover, by the Passover Haggadah, we say by the evil son, you don't give him an answer. Right? You blunt his teeth. Why don't you blunt his teeth? Why do you blunt his teeth? You say if he would have been there, he would have come out of Egypt because he's got an agenda. Someone who's got an agenda, you don't answer him. There's no answer to an answer. So there are plenty of people out there have an agenda. So I have to sit there and try and convince them if they have an agenda. I can't make them drink. Right? They're not going to drink over here. And if they're not going to drink, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? What potentially could I say that is going to answer us? Nothing. They're not interested. Totally not interested. So we said over here, it's going to strengthen us in so many ways, but you have to work hard. Because if it's something so easy, no one's going to do it. Right? It's something you got to fight for. Something, it's going to take a lot of energy.
Great value in your eyes.
It's going to have great value. It's going to take a lot of energy. It's something we have to work hard at. 100% we have to work hard at. But somebody with no knowledge hasn't worked on it. They just throw things out there. Someone will say, hey, where's God during the Holocaust? So, well, I got a great book. It's called Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. You want to read it? They say, no, it's just a question I have to make rabbis fidget. Okay? Right? I know you're not serious. So people throw out blocks. They throw out questions. They're not really interested in the answer. Right? Totally not interested. They say, what about this? What about it? This is something keeping you up late at night. You can't sleep from it. Say, well, if I only had this answer, life would be so different. It's a joke. Nobody's holding there. They're not interested in an answer. Because if they get an answer, and now they understand what their obligation is, they're not interested. Totally not interested over here. Right? So, it's something you have to work hard at. You don't work hard at it, you won't have the knowledge. But most people will say, doesn't matter, I have the knowledge. I don't have the knowledge. I'm going to do whatever I do. Okay? Right? Somebody like that, there's no answer. You're not going to answer them. They're not interested. Do I still have an obligation to run after them, give them information? They don't want to be harassed. They're going to tell you, stop harassing me. I don't want to be harassed over here. Now, comes along Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah of Gerundi, blessed memory, says, look what we said before in the Mishna. Right? This is part 12. Remember, this is part 1, there was a part 2, right? And part 3. Right? What did we say before? We said before, the more flesh, the more worms. Right?
There's
so
logic
over
there.
here.
Yeah, that's obvious. Yeah.
Right? So we said over here, the more Torah, the more life. So what's the connection? The person will say, if I continue to eat, enjoy the frivolities. Nice, good SAT word. The frivolities of the world, of this world, it's going to shorten your life. Right? In other words, if I'm overweight, cause high blood pressure, it'll cause the person all kinds of other issues. It'll shorten your life. Any doctor will tell you that. You don't eat healthy, you don't exercise. It'll shorten your life. Now, what do we say? We said before that the more Torah I learn, the more it strengthens our lives. Right? It gives us more meaning. It does weaken us. That is true. It definitely makes us weaker because, again, if someone's really learning and they're learning strong, your mind hurts. You're tired. Your mind hurts after a while. So he says over here that what? We said the more flesh, the more worms. Because if a person continues to eat and enjoys the frivolities of this world, it's going to shorten your life. The more we learn and strengthen ourselves in Torah, it's going to prolong our life. It's going to extend our life in this world and in the next. You're going to tell me, didn't you just say it makes us weaker? You're right. It makes us weaker. But if we strengthen ourselves in Torah, we follow what God wants, it extends our lives. Not just in this world. Talking about the next world, the spiritual world. Now, that's the mistake. Elisha ben Abuya, otherwise known as Acher, the Rebbe of Rebbe Meir, he misunderstood a verse. Or he misunderstood 2 verses, really. There are 2 verses in the Torah that tell me if I keep this mitzvah, it's going to give me long life. One of them is kibbud avim, honoring parents. Right? If a person honors their parents, what does the Torah say? You get a long life. If a person does shiluach hakein, you shoo away the mother bird, you take the eggs, you also get long life. So Elisha ben Abuya was struggling. Jewish philosophy, in general, read all kinds of heretical things. But what was the final blow that made him a heretic? Final blow that made him a heretic was he saw a child climbing up a ladder, doing the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKen, of shooing away the mother birds. And why was he doing it? Because his father told him to do it. So he's got two mitzvahs here. Shooing away the mother bird and honoring his father. Now, he's climbing up to do the mitzvah. What happens? He falls. Falls off the ladder. Now, when he falls off the ladder, what happens? He dies. He dies. So Elisha ben Abuya says, I got a problem over here. He's doing two mitzvahs that's supposed to grant him long life. He dies as a child. He says, that's it. Torah doesn't make sense. And he becomes a heretic. Now, you have to understand, he was on the Sanhedrin. He was on the Sanhedrin. Many different reasons why he went off. But this was the final blow. This is the final blow. Now, the rabbis disagreed with him. They said, that's not what it means. What is it? When it says long life, doesn't mean this world. Doesn't mean a person's going to live to 105. Doesn't mean that. It means a person's going to have long life in the next world, right? Which needs further clarification, right? But he's gonna have longer life in the next world, a higher portion of the world to come, let's say. Something like that. Now, if that's the case, so the rabbis say, as Talmud tells us, he didn't understand the verse. He made a mistake in the verse. God didn't help him. Over here, he made a mistake. That was it. He became a heretic. Now, there's another aspect here. Comes on the Ben Ish Chaim. Ben Ish Chaim, more than 100 years ago, was the main, I guess, darshan or sermon giver, let's say, in Baghdad. And he wrote like 70 books or more. And one of the books he wrote was on these type of stories in the Talmud. Right? So either you understand him straight away because he gives very clear explanation, or it's Kabbalah. Right? Nothing in between. And he was giving this class that he wrote down these books from, to people in his community after the morning prayer. Imagine the people in the community listening to this word. Okay, so what did he say? So he said, first of all, if you look at this piece of Talmud, Elisha ben Abuya is claiming that this child's doing two mitzvahs. He's shooing away the mother bird should give him long life. He's listening to what his father said should give him long life. Says the Ben Ish Chai, I got a problem. He didn't do either mitzvah. First of all, he fell off the ladder. He didn't take the eggs. And he didn't finish. He didn't fulfill what his father said. He died in the middle. So according to the Ben Ish Chai, since he died in the middle, he didn't fulfill the obligation. If he didn't fulfill the obligation, then the mitzvah that it says at the end of the verse, you're going to have long life, doesn't apply. That's why it doesn't apply. So he made a mistake. He absolutely made a mistake, but there are other reasons. Other reasons why he went off as well. That's not the point here. Right? I only mentioned that if a person is going to learn Torah, right, and they're learning Torah, you're right, it makes you weaker. Physically, it makes us weaker. But the reality is, when we strengthen ourselves in Torah, it's going to prolong our lives. Meaning, what did we say before? Right? We said the more Torah, the more life. So you might say maybe in physical terms, maybe I'm going to live to 105. It's going to be about more meaning in life. Spiritual life. Because the reality is, someone who learns Torah is really called alive, even when they die. Why? Because the people repeat what they said when they died. It's like they're still alive. Right? Secular Jew and non-Jew, not only by Torah mitzvahs, they're already dead. The way they live their lives like animals, they're already dead. They're just lacking burial. Right? Not my idea. My Rebbe said it many times. They lack the ability to live over here. Even when they're alive. Because what are they doing? They're going according to what their base desires tell them. So over here we're saying you strengthen yourself in Torah. It's going to prolong our lives, give more meaning in life. Now, there's a mistake that people make. And the mistake is, if I'm learning Torah mitzvahs, even as a non-Jew, whatever applies to me, and you've probably seen this day in and day out, and I've gotten this question a lot, so why is my life a misery? Why am I suffering like a dog? Why have I applied to so many different jobs and no one's giving me the time of day? and I'm overqualified, right? Or why does someone, I had someone start my classes, and, for conversion, first week, washing machine went. Second week, something with the fridge. By the end of the month, car broke down.
Yep. Boom, bam,
They called
boom,
me.
boom, boom.
They called me up and they say, Rabbi, does this normally happen with your students? I said, yeah, but by you it happened a little bit earlier. Right? So what's going on? A person thinks, I'm going to attach myself to the Jewish people. I'm going to be a Noahide. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. And everything should go smooth. I changed my life. My life has been smooth in a lot of different ways. But a lot of meaningful things. There's no question. And I wouldn't change anything for anything right now. But at the same time, doesn't mean everything goes the way you want.
Yeah, heaven forbid we ever think we're owed something, eh?
That's the hoodsy, right? That's thinking that, God owes us, right? What does Avos say? Why do we get reward? Because we're going to see in the next Mishna whenever we get there, right? Probably another number of weeks, right? What do you want reward for? You think you did the greatest thing. That's what you were created to do. You're created to learn Torah. We're going to beat this thing down, right? Whenever we get to it, right? Whenever we get to it. But why do I think I deserve a hutzi? I deserve reward over here. That's what you're created to do. It's comes on the Laws of Shabbos, and he says in duties of the heart. You know why you get it? You know why I get reward? One reason. It's a chesed. God does it as an act of loving kindness. Does he owe us anything? No. And I've had this, and this is a whole nother topic. Maybe I would just discuss it a little bit. Someone, goes to a rabbinical court, or whatever the case is, and they say, you owe me. I look what I'm doing. I work so hard. I want to be part of the Jewish people, but I can't move to a Jewish community. I just, whatever. My husband's job, this, that, but I'm doing more than most Jews. Okay, very good. So what? You got to live amongst Jews. You have to live within walking distance of a synagogue. Can't make up the laws just for you. But I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing the other thing. I had somebody sent me a nasty email. They said, listen,
only
I'm on disability. Only one, yeah. They said, I'm on disability, I can't move. I got all these references, whatever. The Jewish people owe me. Why do we owe you? Why do we owe you? One of the things the rabbinical court wants to see is if a person is self-sufficient. Doesn't mean they have to be rolling in the dough, right? But they don't want sponges coming to the Jewish people saying, they're going to help me out, so I want to be part of them. Then everyone's going to want to join, right? You got to show some level of self-sufficiency. But if not, if a person moves in the Jewish community, they have difficulty. So yeah, the Jewish community should help them. They should help them. But at the outset, why should that be? The Jewish community wants to see a person on their own feet. Doesn't mean they're not going to be in debt. Doesn't mean they're not going to struggle, right? But at the end of the day, person's got to get up and move. Person's got to do what they need to do, even if they're not making enough money. People struggle. That's what happens. But if a person can't move, why are you going to curse me? Why are you going to curse rabbinic? But they didn't. Rabbinical courts, why are you going to curse them and say, well, you Jewish people owe me? And the reality is, if we would do that on a regular basis, helping out non-Jews and helping them move and helping them this and helping them that, don't you think some unscrupulous people want to do that also because they're going to get help by the Jewish community? We got a lot of our own problems.
Oh, yeah. I've had to actually even stop accepting friendship from certain areas of the planet because as soon as I do, boom, first conversation, they're asking for funds.
Right. So the thing is, there's a reality. So, it was very nice. I said, nobody over here is saying you're not legitimate. Maybe you are legitimate. I'm not saying not, but why is that onus on us? Why is it on us? It's not on us. I learned this from my Rebbe, very clear. There was someone came into rabbinical court many years ago, and this person, didn't work, and he was going all over Europe collecting funds for himself, right? Basically collecting charity. And community told him, yeah, if you want to convert, you should go to this rabbinical court in Israel. So he comes dressed to the hilt, dressed like an Orthodox Jew, which I don't necessarily have a problem with. But for 10 years, this person not worked. He's going to be a burden on us. Right? So they basically got rid of him. They didn't want to deal with him. And my Rebbe said, why is that our problem? He said, this person's going to be a burden to us. Let the non-Jews take care of him. Why should we take care of him? We got enough of our own. Got plenty of our own. God forbid. But, we have a lot of cases amongst the Jewish people we need to help. You're coming here, you're going to be a burden to us. Now, if a person was able to move, even if they're going through difficulty, okay, so yeah, they should be helped. But you got to help yourself at the same time. If you're not going to help yourself at the same time, you're going to be a sponge on us like you're a sponge on everyone else. So why should we help you? Right? It looks kind of fishy. Not to mention the answers that they gave were kind of fishy also, but it doesn't matter. Right? That was before I got involved in conversion. Right? But my Rebbe said clear, told me this clear. This person's going to be a burden to us. Who says we have to go out? We have to help them. So I took that as a precedent. I took that 100% as a precedent, saying that if someone can't move to a Jewish community, I'm not saying it's easy. It's probably one of the hardest things a non-Jew has to do in order to convert. Right? Because, if they have a job and this, who says they can move? And let's say the property's not worth as much, whatever, a lot of different issues. Right? But who says that burden is on us? It's funny in a certain way that non-Jews come with a claim against us. And they'll say, you have to make it easier. You have to do this. If I wanted to be a Christian, God forbid, and I go to the church and I say, listen, everything I learned up until this point, God forbid, it's all hogwash and whatever. I want to be a Christian. I want to convert and whatever. But you're not putting any water on me. I'm not going into a bathtub. I'm not going into the ocean. I'm against water. So they might look the other way, maybe. They'll say, fine, you don't have to go through that in order to convert. Maybe, right? You go to the imam. And you tell him, listen, I'm willing to do, whatever it takes to convert except certain things. But you have to make it easy for me. They're going to say you're an infidel, you deserve to die anyway. Right? So at the end of the day, they're going to say, what? You're gonna come and bring conditions upon us.
I want a PhD, but I don't want to go to school.
Exactly. So you're going to come to us with preconditions. I've spoken about this a lot. No such thing. So why is it that non-Jews come to us and some of them will cop an attitude? Because they'll say, I'm really sincere, but this makes it so hard. Now, if a person went to medical school, I mentioned this last night to somebody. Person goes to medical school. First year, 30% are weeded out. Second year, another 10 to 15%. Why? Because they want to see who's going to stick around. Who's going to be the real deal. Right? They don't pull any punches. You don't get a 70 on these exams. You're out. You have to, a ton of knowledge and all that. You don't fulfill your prerequisite. You're out. Finished. How are you making conditions to your teachers, to the board? You have to understand, I got 2 kids. I don't have enough time to study. They don't care. You paid the funds or you borrowed the funds, whatever it is. You didn't reach the minimum, what you're supposed to do, you're out. What conditions? You don't see it in anything else. You don't see it in sports. You don't see it. You don't see it in academia. You don't see it anywhere. All of a sudden, you're coming to us. And again, I guarantee this does not happen in the church, and it doesn't happen by Muslims or anyone else. No one is going to have the audacity to say such a thing. I'll even take it one step further. Imagine someone, Jew or non-Jew.
I've seen it happen in the churches, and a lot of churches do show a lot of kindness, but then they stick the label on somebody, and you can just see they're never going anywhere because they accepted help or something in a time of need, and boom, right. They've been labeled for life.
Right. It's also, it could also very well be true. But imagine someone goes to a Japanese restaurant. You go to a Japanese restaurant, you walk in, they say, okay, you have to sit on pillows, you have to take off your shoes. Person says, that's against what I believe in, I'm not doing it. So what does the maitre d' tell you? You don't take off your shoes, you don't eat. You don't get served. Say, no, you don't understand. I got a problem with my feet. I can't sit on pillows. Well, look around. Are there any booths? No. Are there any chairs? No. You don't have a choice. Go somewhere else. Now, 100% of the people, unless maybe they're in a wheelchair, something else, 100% of the people, I would say, are not going to give lip service over here. They're not going to have the chutzpah to open their mouth and say, this is what's going to be. You're going to someone else. You're going to dictate to them how you're going to eat, what you're going to... Come on. That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So people say, but you have to make it easier. You have to let more people in. Why do we have to let more people in? What does the Torah tell me that we just read? Who came out of Egypt or from other nations? The Arab, the mixed multitude. Right? They also came with the Jewish people in the desert, and they also received the Torah Mount Sinai. We're suffering from the Arab since that day. Because they're the ones that caused the sin of the golden calf. Part of the Arab, the mixed multitude, are Jews in charge of, let's say, secular Jewish things, secular Jewish organizations, or even in this government in Israel. They all have to be wiped out. The Vilna Gaon says they all have to die before the Messiah can come. Right? So we're going to be all inclusive over here. We let them be part of us. And look at the end result. Look at the end result over here. Right? It's been a disaster. So what? I have to be as open-minded till my brains fall on the floor? No. There's a reality. There are things you're allowed to do, things you're not allowed to do. Right? So, person will say, fine, I'm going to go reform a conservative. Okay? That's your choice. I have no other choice. You do have another choice. You cannot convert. Right? But just because the standard is what it is, who says we can turn it into silly putty? Right? Who says I can turn it into a pretzel and do whatever I want? It doesn't exist.
Heaven forbid.
It doesn't exist. Right? In other places, you're right. Maybe someone will cut you a little bit of slack, but you're going to be, you're going to have a name. You're not going to have such a good name if they would do that. Right? But here you're going to say, wow, there's so many laws. So don't do it. I want to eat pepperoni pizza. Not a problem. So do whatever you want. But if you're going to come to us, there's a standard. You want to be part of something that's fake, something that's never going to last, okay? That 100% is your choice. But you make that choice. Now, is that my obligation to try and draw someone closer in that case? No. If they're coming to me, my job's not to convince them. Right? Sorry, let's say better. I'm not out there to try and convince someone why they should do this. If they come to me and they have questions, it's one thing. It's one thing. Now, if they're contemplating which way to go, I can try and work with them to a certain extent. And tell them that's what I do, whatever. And say, why would you want to do that? It's fake, it's not real, it's this, it's that. But I'm not interested in drawing people closer just to draw them closer. Right? And that's what certainly my Rebbe told me. People come to you, that's a different issue. But you're not out there trying to convince them. Right? As we mentioned before, by the Noahide laws, someone's going to say, you're the Jewish people, chosen nation. You have to be out there paving the streets in order to convince people to be Noahides. Who says? Just because we're the chosen nation, why is it my obligation? If they come to me, different issue. They want information, different issue. I have to convince them for their mitzvahs? Let me ask a better question. What's my obligation to convince a Jew? To come back to Torah and mitzvahs. That's only because we're all intertwined. We don't say that by non-Jews, right? Non-Jews aren't intertwined. We're not intertwined with them. Let them do whatever they want. Say, but they might fall off the face of the map. Not my problem. You can say that's cruel. That's being callous. These things are universal. What they have to keep is universal according to the Torah. I have to convince someone why they shouldn't worship a cow. That's my job. That's my job as a Jew. What is brought down that after, in the Messianic era, non-Jews are going to pull on the tzitzis of a Jew and say, I want to learn Torah. That's the world we're living in right now. They want to understand what Torah is. Good. I have to convince them. You can say, but you're a chosen nation. That's what you're supposed to do. That's not what the Torah tells me. Chosen nation means I have more obligations. Chosen nation means I have to be out there, be squeaky clean. No matter what I do. Whether I'm standing in line, driving, whatever. I have to be squeaky clean. Where do you see that means I have to convince people to do the right thing? Doesn't say that. And I've been hammered on this a number of times, but that's not what the Torah says. That's not what my obligation is. Right? A Jew, I'll do anything I can to bring him back. You know why? Because we're all intertwined. All Jews are intertwined. Doesn't say that by non-Jews. Definitely doesn't say that by non-Jews. Right? So the point over here that we're saying before is the person going to learn Torah is going to strengthen themselves. It's going to extend and prolong our lives. So what about evil people? You see, their lives are also, maybe they live long lives. Maybe they have productive lives. They get married, they have kids, they, wealth, different things, fame, right? They get all these different things going for them. Who says that's life? Right? Who says that's life? They'll say, I have a beautiful wife, I have beautiful kids, etc. And let's say, they're healthy, they're going in the right direction, in secular terms, etc. But who says that's called life? Someone who's called alive, and has true freedom is someone who keeps Torah mitzvahs. By definition, what does the Torah tell me? It tells me to choose life. What is life? We said, the more Torah, the more life. If I don't choose Torah as a Jew, right, even as a non-Jew, does that mean I have life? No. Spiritually, you have nothing. Doesn't matter. A person can have a lot of money, a lot of wealth. They can have other things going for them. Because the mistake people make, as we mentioned before, and this comes up over and over again, that's why I mentioned it, is that people will say, I'm praying, I'm learning hard, I'm changing character traits, I'm doing all these things, and my life is an utter disaster. It's a disaster. Financially, it's a disaster. Many other things. Health-wise could be a disaster. Many, many things. Doing the right thing in God's eyes does not guarantee success. Right? That sounds a little bit controversial. I mean, I am, as William Hall would say, the most controversial rabbi out there. This is not controversial, though. Why? Because if I would do the right thing on a regular basis, I might slip up here, slip up there. Right? But if I do the right thing on a regular basis, what would I assume? My assumption would be God's going to give me everything I need. He'll make me wealthy, great spouse, great kids, all going in the right direction. Now, if that would be the case, in general, if that would be the case, would I have free will? If everything I did touched the gold, and by keeping Torah mitzvahs, would that be the case? No. Who do I learn it out from? As we mentioned before, Abraham. Everyone's worshiping their own gods, their pocket gods. Here's Bob, don't leave home without him. Everyone had their own pocket gods. He never, so they asked him, hey, did God ever speak to you? No, but I know there's a God of design. And he went against everybody. Went against the entire world. So what did God do for him? What did God show him? What was the first trial he goes through? Thrown in the fiery furnace. First thing, right? Then there's a famine. Wife gets taken. Then he has to fight the 5 world powers. Save his only relative, Lot. Gets better. Circumcision. Right? When he's 100 years old. They sacrifice his son. So God says, hey, what do you think of my covenant? What covenant? Right? But he reached unbelievable potential over here. But just because a person keeps the covenant doesn't mean everything goes smooth. No free lunch over here, right? There's no guarantee. And we would say, maybe someone's going to say, Rabbi, life isn't fair. It's just not fair. I'm doing all this. Look at these evil people. And they're flourishing, right? That's an age-old question. Why do righteous people suffer? Evil people have it easy, right? But we don't know. Essentially, we don't know. It could be many, many, many different reasons. It has nothing. We don't, the way we see it.
Yeah. Hashem's ways are so much higher than our ways. Yeah. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. The way we see it, life isn't fair. Right? Yeah. One example. I'll give one example. Example I've given before. A 3-year-old a number of years ago fell in a manhole, tragically died. Someone went chasing after the 3-year-old, try and save them. They're still in a coma, as far as I understand. Toxic gas. They're going to say, where's the justice? First of all, a 3-year-old dies. Why would a 3-year-old die? First question. Second question is, if God is all good, why would that happen?
Second question is, Good Samaritan jumps in, trying to save the person. They're in a coma. Why should that be? Now, we could say, the person did a great thing, right? But shouldn't he, found out if there was gas in there, toxic gas? Or football player tried to save drowning people and he himself drowned. He didn't know how to swim. A little bit of a problem. That's not a good Samaritan. That's an idiot, right? Who says you jump in the water to save somebody? When I went to camp, junior life saving, right? I took when I was 15, right? You have to know how to save somebody because they're going to try and drown you. You can't just jump in.
Yep.
Right? So there are a lot of things we see at face value. A million things we see at face value, we don't understand anything. We don't understand anything. Right? So now people say, but I want to understand. I want to know the measure for measure. Forget the measure for measure. Moshe Rabbeinu says to God, I want to understand your character traits. I want to understand your character traits. What does God say? No one can see my face and live. No one's going to understand what they're going through in this world, right? Most likely, they're never going to understand why they're going through it, etc. Why? Because you can't see God's face and live. Maybe God will throw you a bone. You see some things in hindsight. Most likely, you're not going to understand. You're not going to understand. It's not for us to understand. It's a question of how we deal with it. Right? And we go through a lot of different things. But, I hear more often than not, I'm doing the right thing. I'm going in the right direction, which is true, right? Let's say it's true. Why should this be happening? So I've told people, listen, if you take an accounting, a self-accounting, which I'm giving a class every week, duties of the heart, talking about self-accounting. If a person took a self-accounting before they go to sleep, every day, to take a self-accounting, how much Torah did they learn during the day? How do they interact with others? How do, you take a number of questions, right? Did they accomplish what they were supposed to? All these different things. Not even talking about Kabbalah. Where were your thoughts during the day? What were you thinking about? What did you see? I mean, the list is endless. Now, I would say like this, without being, masochistic and looking at ourselves in an overly critical way. How many people are going to pass that test? I'll make it even more graphic. If we were truly honest, from a scale of 1 to 100, how many people are going to get more than a 60? In general, you're going to say, Rabbi, come on. I should just go to sleep and never take my head off under the covers. You're right. But I'm saying, if we were really honest, and we were playing God, and I put on my funny George Burns glasses, my funny mustache, and I would say, come on, this is how you pray to me? Let me show you where your thoughts are. If a person's really honest, they'll say, come on, God, you got to cut me some slack. I'm really trying, okay? But I'm saying, if God used his true judgment, if he went on his throne of true justice,
yeah,
we'd all
I'd
be
have been
dead.
long gone, sure.
We'd all be dead. There are few people in the world since creation wanted to live according to that standard. One of them was Rabbi Akiva. One of them was Yaakov Avinu. Right? Now, you see what they went through in life. They suffered tremendously. For us today, we wouldn't last 30 seconds. We wouldn't last 30 seconds if God didn't have mercy. We'd all be gone. Right? So now we invoke God's mercy, because if we really take stock of what we did during the day, what we should have done, all these different things, we have a lot to work on. Tremendous amount of work on. If it wasn't for God's mercy, you're right. We'd all be dead. Isn't God going to understand we're holding? Oh, so that's a major catch-22. Because now you're going to say, we've been doing more than 90 episodes. We're talking about all these ethics, all these levels we should try and be reaching, and we're not even coming close. Well, but we're doing more, and we're doing better probably than 95% of the world. Let's say I would agree. We're trying, we're keeping what applies to us, we're learning, we're being nicer, all these different things. Trying to change character traits. Avos Avos says we don't do a quarter what we're supposed to do. A quarter! Right? So, you're going to say, so why bother? eat, drink, and marry, lest tomorrow I die. That's not an option. We have to be the best we can and hope God has mercy. That God has infinite mercy here. Right? But if we know better, I would say the punishment is going to be that much greater. Why? Because you know better. You know better. Now, a person will say, isn't it better than to be unlearned? If I'm unlearned, God won't have as many claims against me. Right? What's the problem?
Ignorance is just ignorance. It's not bliss.
Right. So you're in trouble with that also.
Yeah.
100% you're in trouble with that. Right? So if that's the case, then we're lucky to be alive. We're lucky to be alive. What are we going to answer in the next one? As we're recording now, everything that we do in our lives is being recorded. That's why when somebody dies, first thing they see is the life flash before their eyes. Right? Everything they've done, that's what a person has out-of-body experience, Jew or non-Jew. That's the first thing they see. The first thing they see. So we can't say my hand wasn't in the cookie jar. Our hand wasn't in the cookie jar, and then we have to justify why it was.
Freeze frame.
So we're all in trouble here. We're all in trouble. But at the end of the day, you're right, God has mercy. But we have to have mercy on ourselves, but we have to be realistic. My Rebbe said, if you live in the past, you don't have any future. So we have to be realistic. We're not doing what we should do. And every day we mentioned, Torah is always connected. We mentioned the beginning. Every single second we're alive, we're closer to death. It's an aging process. So don't we have to take stock of what we do? 100%. So why do we wait till it's too late? Right? We saw him in Pirkei Avos. Don't say I'm going to learn tomorrow. You don't know what today's going to be. Right? You say, when I have time, I'll learn. CFL's over. You got no excuses. Right? Why can't I learn?
Rabbi, we got a question on YouTube. Can you take a question?
Huh?
Can you take a question off of YouTube?
Yeah, sure.
Chris is asking, can people be punished for not fulfilling their potential?
Yes.
There you go, Chris. Straightforward. Yep.
It depends. It depends what the potential is. Some people have greater potential. Some people have, less potential that they have to reach. But isn't everybody at some level not going to reach what their potential is? Maybe. Right? We all have potential. Everybody has potential. Right? So I'd say like this, in short, I would say nobody knows what their potential is. Right? Because I had an 18, 19-year-old guy tell me, Rabbi, you don't have to give me Muslim. I'm holding better than 95% of world Jewry. Right? So I said, let's say I agree with you, but God doesn't. Which I don't agree with you either, but let's say. Right? So if God says you have greater potential, and you're only maximizing 10%, there's payback. Right? There will be payback. We have to reach potential.
Yeah.
Right?
Or be accountable for the squandering.
Oh, that's also true. But remember, every person, when their soul goes into the body, they're given a message.
Right.
They're given something they need to fix up. There's something they need to do. Right? So one rabbi once explained to me, and I'm not saying this is the explanation. They're going to say, how do I know what I'm doing in the world? How do you know what my purpose is? So one rabbi explained to me that think of something that's probably the most difficult thing you would ever want to do. You'd rather slice your eyeballs with glass or your veins with glass rather than do it. Right? Some people, it's showing gratification. Someone did us a favor. For some people, it's saying, I'm sorry. For some people, it's something you'd never, ever want to do. It's the worst thing you'd ever want to do. Now, is that the real reason? No. I'm not saying that's the reason. Right? But when it comes to potential, I would say like this. Nobody knows what their potential is. Nobody knows what they're really doing in the world. Right? Because when a person's born, they forget everything. Forget all the Torah they learned, forget everything. Right? Everything's forgotten. So you're going to say, how do I know what my potential is? Right? So somebody, when I was giving this explanation, so another guy says, well, if I keep kosher and I keep Shabbos to myself, am I safe? And then someone else says, what if I hold by, the kashrut supervision of OU, right? The Union of Orthodox Rabbis, like, oh, he's dead. He's in trouble, right? If a person is holding where they shouldn't be, or whatever, they don't reach their potential, they're going to be held liable. Now, the question is how much? How much? I would say like this, a secular Jew or a non-Jew not doing what they're supposed to do, right? They're going to say, well, I was never told. What do you mean you were never told? Right? You have to look into life. Even if you're born as a secular Jew, even if you were born in, Mao's communist China, you'd be waving that red flag. But didn't God give you a brain? Bunch of idiots, in India worshiping cows. But I get contacted by people from India all the time. Didn't God give us a brain unless you're mentally challenged? He gave us a brain to figure things out. Even if the things are universal. We don't know what our potential is. So my answer was, why in the world would you want to rest on your laurels? Resting on your laurels not going to help over here. Because I said, if I would agree, which I don't, but if I would agree that you are holding better than 95% of world Jewry, what if God doesn't? Right. What if you're just holding at a minimal level? You might get reward for it, but you have greater potential. You have much greater potential. Right? If someone would have told me 15 years ago, I'd be doing what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
I would have gone through what I went through to give other people strength and this and that. Maybe my biggest ego said, yeah, I could do that. But if I didn't have the knowledge, come on.
You can't give what you don't have. Yeah.
That's also true. Right? But so God, in many ways, can bring out character traits that by you are dormant. And he can bring them out in an unbelievable way. I use myself as an example. While we're ending here, I use myself. Right? So if a person has a lot of money, they don't really have compassion, or they may not have compassion to people that don't have money.
Oh, yeah.
Or people that struggle, especially if you inherited it. You didn't work for it. So you could be kind of callous. Maybe you could be kind of callous and not, and not emote with them. Because you don't understand what they're going through. You can't even give them chizuk, strength of what they're going through, because you never went through it. So God's, so it could be part of my trial was, okay, first of all, he had everything. It was given to him. So Mr. S says, take it away. Let's see. Just like Job. Take it away and see. Is he going to blaspheme against me? Is he going to say things against me? Is he going to be thankful for what he had? Right? I'm going to say, I had good days and bad days. But I never complained. Oh, why, God, are you doing this, and that? Never. Because you don't spit in God's face. Right? If I would have said all the mitzvahs that I did, God forbid, weren't worthwhile, and look what God did over here, I lose everything. You lose everything.
Yeah, you've clarified that.
So now I would say I can give strength to others because I've been on that side. I've been on both sides. Now, if I wasn't on that side and I didn't struggle, I wouldn't be able to say the same things with the utmost of clarity. Why not? Because I didn't go through it. There are great people, let's say that never had children, but were experts in child rearing, right? So that's a different thing. Right? But if someone didn't go through certain things, right? We always say you can't judge a person unless they've been in their same shoes. You don't know what they're going through. You have no idea. You have no idea, so you can't judge them, right? So now, if I didn't have that understanding, God says, you know what? I'm going to put you in a situation. I'm going to put you in an odyssey for, 17 years. I'm going to beat you down till you're on your knees many times. But you know what I'm going to do? You're going to have better times. You're going to have worse times. Things will stabilize to a certain extent. But you're going to give this over to others. And I'm going to laugh. And I'm going to say, come on. This is the way you do things. This is the way it's organized. I have no idea. Right? But there was a dormant character trait inside myself. I'm just using myself as an example. Right? Inside myself. A dormant character trait that came to the forefront. You know why it came to the forefront? Because I got beaten down in a really nasty type of way. And something that was in my face for 17 years. There's a certain level of closure. Fine. Right? But I got beaten down in life. So how can I speak about it? Because I went through it. Now you're going to say, did you always have good days? No. And when you see other people around you with money and not
Stay
caring,
honest about it. Yeah.
and not caring one iota, and you're borrowing money for food, it's a little bit hard. It's a little bit hard to hear people going here, doing this, doing that, and they could care less. Say, so get a job, so do something, so this, so that, right? So I always say, you never beat someone, you never kick someone in the head when they're down. And I was kicked a number of times from a lot of different places. But you know what?
Places you never expect either, right?
No, I wouldn't say I didn't expect it. Because when I look at it in hindsight, these people are callous. A lot of these people are callous. They had, they think what they think because it doesn't really matter why they think what they think, right? But they're not such caring people. They just care about themselves. If I was running, I'll just end with this. I remember I was running for a train in New York and my token got stuck, right? And I went flying like 30 feet. And someone looks over and says, wow, that looked like it hurt. Didn't help me up. Just left me there on the ground. So I had that. I had people around. I said, okay, so do something. You should have done this when you had money. Should have done that. Why didn't you do this? Everyone's a Monday morning quarterback over here. So I got hammered on both sides. When I had money, when I didn't have money, right? It wasn't pleasant. Totally wasn't pleasant. But guess what? My realization was, these people not only are callous, they're more than callous, right? But they don't have they're not a vessel to be able to even emote. Some of these people. And some of them are narcissists. They only think about themselves. Only care about themselves. Now, could other people bail me out and help me? I had somebody that did, okay, to a certain extent. Everyone else, no one said boo. Nobody.
They avoid you.
Forget about money. There was no emotion involved. Boy, I can't believe this. Boy, I can't believe that. That one person say something over the years. Everyone, because they know the situation. They know the other part of the situation. Okay. But what about everyone else? Where's the emotion? I'm not saying they had to pick me up. Where's the emotion? None. So not only did I got left handing the bag, I got holding the bag, but I got beaten down in other ways. Now, if I look at it in hindsight, I would say, of course, because these people aren't holding anywhere. The most important question they may ever ask in their lifetime: do I put ketchup or mustard on my hot dog? So there was no one there emotionally. So I had to find solace in other places. My Rebbe helped me, other people helped me, etc. And no one could believe things that I went through. And they said, you're holding up half the world, what you've been through. Because I'm not going to tell the other part of the story because no one would believe it. They'd be licking my bootstraps.
No,
Nobody.
I read your manuscript, Rabbi.
Nobody. Yeah, but you didn't read the end. I didn't write the end of what happened. Right? But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to put my dirty laundry out. But no one would believe it. And if I would put that in there, I could sell millions of books, millions. Because no one. I sell out the movie rights because no one in their right mind would ever believe it. No one ever believe it. I'm not tooting my own horn. It's a tremendously weird, totally strange thing. It doesn't make any sense at all in a number of ways. But
Hashem knows all our days before one of them yet begins.
No, he knows. But how is he going to draw that out of me? I wouldn't have picked that in a million years. But guess what? I can speak about it with clarity, with emphasis, and I can understand. You know why? Because I got totally beaten down, and nobody was there. Nobody was. Imagine nobody's there emotionally. So, you're just left there like banged on the head. And they just left you to drown. They left you to drown. Now, people say, who says they should have given you money? I'm not even saying about money. It had nothing to do with money. I'm talking about emotionally relating. And if someone can't emotionally relate,
it's almost inhuman, isn't it?
When you're beaten down, that's a sad commentary in life. But you know what? I understand it clear because they're not a vessel to be able to do that. And these people are totally insane. 100% insane. Because they don't have Torah, they don't have mitzvahs, they don't have anything. So that makes perfect sense. There are people that are more caring, people that are less caring. People say, wow, that looked like it hurt. But if it's in your face 24/7, right? One person can actually say something. What about everyone else? No one else says boo. No one else, so wow, that, people in the know, I didn't hear anything. Nothing. Wow. Like it didn't exist.
Well, right, Rabbi, I got to get ready for my next class. Are we tentatively on for a part 13 next week? Is your schedule allowed?
We are for part 13, 100%. 100%. We're going to still be
Hashem willing, we will be back next week, folks, continuing Pirkei Avos. Rabbi, thank you so much for sharing the depth, some beautiful stuff, and we're thankful to Hashem that the work He's done in your life because you are able to share it, and we encourage you to keep going, folks. You can always reach out to Rabbi Coffman at his website, orthodoxconversion.com, or you can find him on his YouTube. Just search him, Rabbi Chaim Coffman, on YouTube. I'm sure you'll find his site. He's got so much going on weekly, classes up north there in Israel. He's just so out there shining the light of Torah, and we appreciate
Hey,
him.
come on. I'm so out there. That's not a compliment. He's out there. He's like, no, I know.
Fringe. No. Yeah, he's just a ball of energy. We do appreciate him. So we're going to sign off for today, but we will be back next week. Till then, everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day.